Mira stretched her legs after a long day of work, enjoying the peaceful evening air that surrounded her rural home. The distant colony planet had been her sanctuary for the past 2 years, a quiet place where she could escape the chaos of intergalactic exploration. She traded her days of adventure for a simpler life, tinkering with old tech and farming her small plot of land. But that evening something felt off. As she walked near the edge of the dense forest that bordered her property, Mira noticed a strange glimmer in the distance. Her heart quickened, not with excitement but with caution. She wasn't the type to shy away from danger, but she had grown to appreciate the peace here. Yet curiosity drove her forward. Through the trees she spotted it, a small alien shuttle half buried in the dirt, smoke rising from its broken hull. It wasn't large, certainly no warship, but it had crash-landed hard. Mira approached cautiously, the scientist in her already analyzing the scene. The design was unfamiliar but it looked damaged beyond repair. The real shock came when she peered inside. 2 small figures lay crumpled on the floor of the shuttle, their bodies covered in grime, clothes tattered. They were children, aliens but unmistakably children. Mira's breath caught in her throat as she took in their appearance. Silver-skinned with delicate bioluminescent markings that flickered faintly in the growing dusk, they looked fragile and out of place in this harsh world. Without hesitation, Mira climbed into the shuttle and knelt beside them. They were unconscious but alive, their breathing shallow. A wave of protective instinct surged through her. She couldn't just leave them here. Gently she scooped them up, one at a time, cradling their limp forms in her arms. They were so light, so fragile. "It's okay," she whispered, though they couldn't hear her. "I've got you." Back at her home, Mira set them on a soft bed and went to work cleaning their wounds and bandaging small injuries. As she tended to them, she wondered who they were and how they had ended up here so far from any known civilization. The shuttle had no identifying markers, and their alien features were unlike any species she had encountered in her years of exploration. When she finished, she sat beside the bed, watching over the twins as they slept. They couldn't be more than 8 years old, their faces peaceful despite the clear trauma they had endured. Mira found herself wondering what they had been through, and what had driven them to crash on this forgotten planet. As the night wore on, one of the children stirred, opening large glassy eyes that reflected the dim light of the room. They looked at her with a mixture of fear and confusion. "It's all right," Mira said softly, offering a reassuring smile. "You're safe now." She didn't know where they came from or what danger might follow them, but one thing was certain. These children were now hers to protect. Months had passed since Mira found Lix and Varis, the alien twins, and her once quiet life had changed in ways she could never have predicted. The children, still recovering from the trauma of their crash, had slowly opened up to her. They spoke little at first, their native language foreign and strange, but Mira's patient efforts with translation tech soon helped them communicate in broken Earth common. The twins had grown more comfortable with her, and in their own cautious ways, they began to share fragments of their past. They spoke of a homeworld Mira had never heard of, Veltoria, and of a great war that had taken their parents. Every time they mentioned their family, their faces clouded with fear, so she didn't push for details. She knew the pain of loss all too well, and forcing them to relive it wouldn't help. In the quiet of her rural home, Mira tried to give them the stability they needed. She taught them basic Earth customs, introduced them to farming, and helped them adjust to the rhythms of their new life. Lix, the older of the two by mere minutes, was curious and analytical, always asking questions about the strange world they now inhabited. Varis, quieter and more reserved, often stayed close to Mira, seeking comfort in her presence. But despite the peace they were building, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that danger lurked just beyond the horizon. It wasn't long before strange things began happening. Lix and Varis possessed abilities Mira had never encountered before, even in her years of space exploration. Lix could manipulate energy in subtle ways, causing lights to flicker, small machines to power on without being plugged in. Varis, on the other hand, seemed to have an intuitive sense of others' emotions, always knowing when Mira was stressed or worried. Mira kept these abilities hidden from the other colonists, knowing that any hint of something unusual could draw unwanted attention. But the children's growing powers were a reminder that they were not ordinary, and the quiet life she had built for them was fragile. One afternoon, while in the bustling market of the colony's main town, that fragility was shattered. As they gathered supplies, Mira noticed a group of outsiders, tall, armored figures moving through the crowds with a deliberate purpose. They were scanning the area with advanced tech, and Mira's gut twisted with unease. Lix and Varis stiffened beside her, their usually calm expressions betraying fear. Varis clutched her hand tightly, his wide eyes darting toward the strangers. "They're looking for us," he whispered, his voice trembling. Mira didn't hesitate. She pulled them both close, slipping out of the market and into the maze of side streets that led back toward the forest. Her heart raced as she navigated the winding paths, her mind flashing back to the day she found them. It was clear now, whoever was after the twins wasn't going to stop. Back at home, Mira made a decision. They couldn't stay here any longer. The life they had built, fragile as it was no longer safe. They would have to disappear. Mira guided Lix and Varis through the dense forest, her mind racing as they moved deeper into hiding. She had expected the peaceful life she'd created for them to last longer, but the strangers in the market had shattered that illusion. Whoever they were relentless in their pursuit of the twins, and Mira knew their time was running out. After several days of hiding in an old mining outpost, Mira reached out to the only person she could trust, Talon. A former crewmate from her days as a space explorer, Talon had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer. He arrived without delay, his ship landing discreetly under cover of night. Talon, a battle-hardened man with sharp eyes and a wiry build, took one look at the twins and knew something was wrong. "Mira, who are they?" he asked, glancing from Lix to Varis. There was a hint of urgency in his voice that told her this situation was bigger than either of them had realized. Mira explained what little she knew, telling him about the crash, the children's powers, and the hunters that had come for them. Talon listened carefully, his expression darkening. When she finished, he let out a long breath. "I think I know why they're being hunted." He handed her a data pad filled with reports from his network of contacts. "They're from Veltoria," Talon said, nodding toward the twins. "That planet's been in chaos since their king and queen were assassinated. These two, Lix and Varis, they're not just any refugees. They're the last surviving heirs to the Veltorian throne." Mira's breath caught in her throat. Royal heirs? The children had mentioned their parents being important, but she hadn't expected anything like this. The weight of the truth settled over her like a storm cloud. If Lix and Varis were heirs to a kingdom, their lives were in far more danger than she had imagined. Talon continued. "The man who took over Veltoria, General Zorith, is a brutal dictator. He spent years consolidating power. If he finds out these two are alive, he'll stop at nothing to eliminate them." Mira looked at the twins who sat quietly by the fire. They were still children, too young to understand the full magnitude of their situation. Lix's eyes flickered with faint bioluminescent light, his mind no doubt racing with questions. Varis, always more sensitive, watched Mira with concern, his ability to sense her emotions making him acutely aware of the rising tension. "They can't go back," Mira said, her voice firm but filled with dread. "Not yet. We have to prepare them," Talon replied. "If they're going to survive this, and reclaim their throne, they need to understand who they are." Mira's heart ached at the thought. These children, who had already endured so much, now faced an unimaginable burden. But there was no turning back. The truth had been uncovered, and their enemies wouldn't rest. Lix and Varis weren't just her adopted children anymore, they were royalty. And soon the fight for their future would begin. The night was eerily silent as Mira, Talon, and the twins huddled inside the abandoned mining facility, surrounded by the dense, alien wilderness. The quiet before the storm pressed down on them like a heavy weight. Mira could feel it in her bones. Zorith was coming. His forces had been closing in for days, and now the final confrontation was inevitable. Mira knelt in front of Lix and Varis, her hands resting gently on their shoulders. "You're strong," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "You've survived so much already. We'll get through this." Lix, his bioluminescent markings glowing faintly, nodded with determination, though Mira could see the fear in his eyes. Varis, quieter as always, clung to her hand, sensing the tension but trying to stay brave. Talon finished setting up the last of their makeshift defenses. Hidden traps, energy barriers, and whatever weapons they could scavenge. "We've got maybe an hour," he muttered, checking the scanners. "When they get here, it'll be a fight." Mira swallowed hard. She wasn't a fighter, not like Talon, but she would do whatever it took to protect these children. They were more than just royal heirs to her now, they were her family. A low hum filled the air, the telltale sound of an approaching ship. "They're here," Talon said grimly. "Get ready." The facility's main doors blasted open with a deafening roar, and through the smoke Zorith's soldiers marched in, tall, imposing figures in dark armor, weapons drawn. Behind them, Zorith himself stepped forward, his presence suffocating. His eyes locked on Lix and Varis, a cruel smile curling his lips. "So, the lost heirs finally emerge," Zorith sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "You think you can hide from me forever?" Lix and Varis stood frozen, fear radiating from them, but Mira stepped in front of them, her stance protective. "You'll have to go through me first," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her insides. Zorith laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You think a human can stand in my way? Pathetic." Before Zorith could move, Lix's hand shot up, his markings glowing brighter. The air around them crackled with energy as he tapped into the power he'd been afraid to use. A blast of energy erupted from his palm, knocking several of Zorith's soldiers off their feet. At the same time, Varis closed his eyes, focusing on the emotions of those around him. He sent a wave of calm to Mira and Talon, steadying their nerves, while amplifying the fear in Zorith's soldiers, making them hesitate. Talon took advantage of the chaos, engaging the soldiers in combat, his movements quick and precise. Mira, though not a warrior, held her ground, firing at the soldiers with fierce determination. Zorith, however, remained unfazed. "Is that the best you can do, boy?" he taunted Lix, stepping forward with a menacing grin. But before he could strike, Lix and Varis combined their powers, releasing a massive energy wave that surged through the facility, short-circuiting Zorith's tech and forcing him to retreat. Panting, Mira pulled the twins into a tight embrace. "You did it," she whispered, pride swelling in her chest. But they all knew this wasn't the end. Zorith had fled, but he would be back. And next time they would be ready. The fight for their freedom and their throne had only just begun.